to meet on Saturday. It's the same God that rose again on Sunday. Changed the focus away from the old creation to the new. You see that? So in a similar way, the church de-emphasizes or defocuses on the Old Testament saints in favor of the new. Does that make sense? All right. Very good. All right. So a real brief run through of what I'm talking about Jesus in Genesis. Remember in Hebrew, the book of Genesis isn't called Genesis. Jews don't refer to that. They refer to it as Bereshit, which simply means in Hebrew, the beginning, or in the beginning. Okay? So the first line here, we have Bereshit bara Elohim. Then we have the Aleph, Tav, and then the rest of this. So that's your Hebrew lesson for today. Bereshit bara Elohim. In the beginning, God created. That's what you're saying in Hebrew. And this is the Aleph and Tav. The first letter and the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. It's untranslatable, and no one knows why it's there. Dennis Prager made no mention of it. I was curious to see if he did. He did not in his commentary. I will. I think I just might do that.
Oh, you must.
I want to find out what the ancient rabbis had to say about that, because it's not a mistake. If it were simply a mistake, it would have been eliminated in the translation, in the transcription over the century. People would have recognized, oh, someone made a silly error, and just it would have been gone. But the fact that it keeps being translated down through the centuries means that it's part of the original text that God commanded, most likely through Moses, to get us here. So the question is, why is this here? What does it mean? Yes?
Just wondering, in the translations that have come since, how come we don't see an A and D in our Bible?
Because it's just simply two letters that have no significance.
Okay, so
It's untranslatable. There's no translation for it.
now you can just make out the letters and try to figure it out later on.
Right. And you would never know this by reading our translations because it's not there.
Is it in the Jewish Bible?
Yes.
Maybe I'll ask the Jewish rabbi.
I'd be curious to know what they say. Okay? It's one of those mysteries of the scriptures that no one has a sufficient answer for. Why is this here? Why is it here? I think this is Jesus saying, I was here. In the beginning was the Word. And I was the Word. Revelation 1:8 and 22:13. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. Well, that's the beginning and the end. Who said that? Jesus. Is this Jesus? Yes. That's what I believe about this. Okay? So where else can we find Jesus in the Genesis story? Well, here is a rundown of the creation account. We went over this last week. Genesis 1, verses 1 and 2. God creates the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and void. First day, God creates light and darkness. Next day, he creates the sea and the sky. Next day, he creates the dry land and the plants. Next day, day 4, sun, the moon, and the stars. Day 5, birds and fish. Day 6, he creates the land animals first, and then he creates man and woman. Okay? This is basically where we're going to pick up with our study, because all of creation focuses on these two last events: the creation of man and woman, and the Sabbath rest that God initiates at the end of creation. God rests and creates the Sabbath, the day of rest. He makes it holy. Okay? So this is the old creation account. And if you have your commentary, page, what is it, 8? Nope, wrong. 18, I was close. You have that account, that chart that I kind of made right here. Okay? Where it talks about formlessness and emptiness and how God answers those two parts of creation. We wouldn't call them problems, but it's like, well, it's formless and empty. Let's give it some structure and fill it up. And how does God create? Is it just one type of fish? Only guppies, right?
Nope.
All kinds of it. Only one kind of bird, pigeons?
No.
Oh.
Many
All
kinds.
kinds of birds. Only one kind of animal, rats?
No.
Oh no. Many kinds. Kinds that are no longer living. Dinosaurs and so forth. Remember, this is a creation story. God is describing how he did creation, not how long it took him, as far as our understanding of millions of years. Okay? So there are, well, why did God do that? Everyone, okay, if you're right, Chip, and God didn't just do this in 6 days, literally, but this is it's a stylized account of a real fact. God created everything. Everything. Well, then how does the dinosaurs fit in? And why were they created millions of years ago if no one ever saw them? What was the point? Well, you know, that's a very interesting question. And here's something towards an answer to that. I think God was in no rush. I think he created creation and then just saw how it goes. Ooh, I like this. And just kind of enjoyed the whole thing. I mean, who said he was in a rush? You know? You know, I like the stars. I'm just going to enjoy this. Hundreds of years, thousands. Oh, I put planets around them. All kinds of planets. Rocky ones, gaseous ones, some with rings, some with not. Yes?
I think there was more purpose than just enjoyment.
Oh, I think that there is too. But I'm getting to that.
Yeah.
Okay. So that when it came to putting life on this planet, there's no rush. Just let it be. Guide it. I mean, God knew where he was going with all of this. Just enjoy it. Dinosaurs, millions. Okay, time to wipe them out. Let's start with another, you know? But why do that? Well, think about it, my brothers and sisters. Where does all of our oil come from? The deposits of, why do we call them fossil fuels? It's because they're the remains of dinosaurs. So do you think God may have been anticipating our need and use of things like oil and coal? Yeah. Here's a way to get it. Do you ever think that God kind of knew those kinds of things in advance?
Yes.
And processed it in a way that we could discover it much later and understand it as such? I don't see any reason why not. I think it's at least a possibility. It's not impossible to think of it that way. Don't you think, though, Chip, that God could have just put oil into the earth? Well, of course. That's not the issue. The point is, why do we think it all has to be so fast? You know?
We have to grow with it. We have to learn from one and go into
you know, think of all the hundreds and thousands of years of recorded time. No one ever knew of exoplanets. What are exoplanets? Planets orbiting other stars. They were the things of science fiction until the early 1990s when they were scientifically discovered. You realize that, right? The only planets that we ever knew of in the whole universe were the ones that were orbiting our sun. We postulated there were others, but we had no direct proof. Now, not only do we have evidence for planets, we're starting to photograph them with our cameras. Photographing planets around other stars, around other solar systems. Hubble did that, yes. And to me, that's absolutely extraordinary. And it's like, to think that these were unknown to us for thousands of years. Why are they there? For our benefit, maybe? To show the vastness? How when we think we've got God's creation figured out, guess what? We find something else that baffles or beautifies it in a way that we never thought of before. And that gives God glory.
And he makes it in a way, in such a way that we benefit all those things that he creates, ultimately man and even animals, and benefit from what he has created.
Yes. Yes. Nell is saying that all the things that we discover about the universe ultimately benefit us here. And I would agree. I think of all the scientific advancement, all the technology, all of the invention, all of the time and brain power it was used to make the machines to be able to see these things. I mean, it's truly extraordinary. And the side benefits of all of that research benefits us for good or for ill. Yes? So, I think we need to give that an acknowledgement. You know? So, that's just something to consider. So what I want to do now is I want you to see, now that we know this creation account, I want you to see how the gospel according to John, which has this immediate connection to Genesis. The first verse of John chapter 1, the Gospel of John says, "In the beginning was the Word." And since the beginning of the church, every theologian has understood that this has a clear allusion. What does it sound like? In the beginning. Genesis. So it's been understood from the beginning that John's gospel is making a clear reference to Genesis. The question is, how deep does that reference go? And what does it mean? Why does John write his gospel this way? Well, I want you to see this comparison. So on this side, yeah, it's got to be opposite. On that side is Genesis 1. And on this side is John chapter 1. And you're going to see how these compare. And what you get from this is the sense that there's another creation account being illustrated here in the Gospel of John. So in Genesis 1, it begins, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. John 1 begins, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. Through him all things were made. What does that sound like?
The creed.
Our creed. Right? Through him all things were made. For us men and for our salvation, he came down from heaven. Well, who is that he that is referencing? Jesus. So here in the Gospel of John, who is the Word? Well, you're going to find out very soon that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Who was that?
Jesus.
So it's very clear in the Gospel of John that he is saying that Jesus is God. And that this is the same God that was in the creation account. And he's making this connection very, very clear. Okay? So, in the first verse, it's day 0. It's just the introduction. In the same way, John introduces us that way. In the first day, he says, "Let there be light," and there was light. Now look at John 4. John 1:4. "In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." Doesn't that have a similar sound to how God creates light and darkness? You think that this is by mistake? Say no. No. There is a deliberate account here of connecting the Word that became flesh with the Creator God of Genesis. Okay? There is another creation going on here with the Word. Yes? By the way, how does God create in the first creation?
From nothing.
How does he do it?
By word.
He says. He says. He says, "Let there be light." He says, "Let the sun, the moon, the stars burn." He says, "Let there be." Said. What do you, when you say something, you use words. And who is the Word? Jesus. You see how all of this is very clearly being connected? The first creation was created simply by the Word of God. Yes. And this Word